She takes the blame, she covers the shame, removes the stain. It could be her name, Grace. It's the name for a girl. It's also a thought that changed the world. And when she walks on the street, you can hear the strings. Grace finds goodness in everything. What once was hurt, what once was friction, what left a mark, no longer stings, because grace makes beauty out of ugly things. As you can imagine, our house is often a noisy place, full of sound, most of which are quite loud. This song was written by Bono in response to John Newton's classic hymn, Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. What fascinated Bono as a musician was the idea that there was a sound of grace. Now we live in a blame culture. There's always a need to find the person at fault. Things just can't happen anymore. There's no such thing as an accident. It must be someone's fault, and therefore I should seek justice, and maybe a bit of compensation as well. We see this even with coronavirus. Some people seem desperate to find someone to blame. Maybe they're looking for who started it, or who spread it, or blame the government for the way it's been handled. The search for someone to blame feeds into our natural sense of justice and recompense. I hurt, and therefore someone must be punished. The idea of revenge, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. This sense of justice also appears as the building block of our world. It's reflected in most religions and ideologies, the idea of karma, or getting what you deserve, reaping what you sow. And to be honest, it appears to make a lot of sense. It's logical, and I think most people could accept it. I could believe in a God like that. But then grace showed up. It was countercultural. It goes against everything that seems natural. No, grace. Grace is about getting what you don't deserve. People sometimes talk about grace being a New Testament idea, but the reality is you can see grace woven through the whole story of God's people. When you read the Bible sometimes it feels a bit like a stuck record. It goes round and round. God builds a relationship with his people. His people walk with him for a while, and then they go their own way. They rebel against him. So God calls them back and says, I'm really disappointed. I should punish you for what you've done. You don't deserve me, but I love you. And so here's a way back. And God rebuilds his relationship with man. And they walk together for a while, and then man goes his own way again. And round the circle it goes, over and over, an endless circle, from the Garden of Eden through to the Garden of Gethsemane. And this cycle is only broken once and for all through the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. In Paul's letter to the Ephesians it says, for by grace you have been saved through faith. And this is not your own doing, it is the gift of God, not the result of works. St. Augustine recognised that the Latin word gratia, or grace, is linked to the word gratis, or freely given. When was the last time you experienced grace? In the 25 years of marriage, there have been many moments when our relationship has survived because of grace. Equally, in our experience, parenthood is all about grace. I think it was in the Care for the Family Parenting course where Rob Parsons suggested that it was okay sometimes to say to our children, I love you, I just don't like you sometimes. These are moments of grace. They are moments when we admit to our disappointment, the thing that could come between us, and we set them aside. We find a route back because the relationship is more important than the argument. But we also need grace in our daily lives. When did you last let down a friend? The time you didn't call when they needed you to. You didn't lend a hand, or you said something insensitive. The time you annoyed your neighbour by blocking their drive, or the radio was on too loud, or your football destroyed their prize roses. Even in church, we let each other down. We say things out of turn. We fail to act when we should. I know that I have let people down within KBC. I know that over the years I have said things that I shouldn't have said, but I have also known that I have received grace from within KBC. I've recently been reading a book by an American pastor called Nadia Bolz-Weber. She says it's her practice when welcoming new people to the church to let them know that at some point they will be let down, that she will say something stupid or she will disappoint them. And she asks them to think before that happens whether they will stick around after it happens. But she tells them if they choose to leave, they will miss out the way that God's grace comes in and fills in all the cracks left behind by our brokenness. And that's too beautiful to miss. But grace isn't cheap. It's not easy to give or to receive. Grace is defined by the simple elegance or refinement of movement. The ballerina appears to float across the stage elegantly graceful. But what we don't see are the years of rigorous work that go into making those movements that we describe as beautiful. How often do we forget the blood and the pain that enabled God's grace? So what does grace sound like? I don't know about you, but there's that moment, that sound of grace that goes right into your soul. You can hear it as the tension is washed away at a moment of reconciliation. It's the gentle weeping in your heart as you are reminded that you are loved. It's also the Zoom call to someone living with loneliness. It's the knock at the door with medicines delivered to those self-isolating. It's the tins clanking in the bags being carried away from food bank, and the sound of footsteps crossing the road to give you space. It's the voice of the care worker reading messages from families who can't come visit. It's the rustling sound of PPE being tied whilst the ventilators pump their life-giving oxygen. And it's the clapping in appreciation of neighbours on a Thursday evening. There's sweet music in the sound of grace. It's not in the crash of drums or the scream of guitars. No, as Bono says, these are the moments when you hear the gentle lullaby of the strings. One of the best things about the last few months has been the silence. The reduction in road noise and in aeroplanes has meant it's been possible to hear sounds that are normally drowned out. There's a real sense of stillness around. Grace is a gift from God to us. But as with all great gifts, if you hold them to yourself, if you squeeze them too tightly, you squeeze the life out of them. Now, grace is a gift that's been given to us to share. I believe that every time we reach out to one another in love, we too join that symphony of grace. Our lives become instruments in that great orchestra, and I pray that in these quiet days, you will hear that amazing sound of grace. And I trust that through many dangers, toils and snares, we have already come. 'Twas grace that brought us safe thus far, and grace will lead us home.